If we, perfect, thank you. Welcome to the April 14th meeting of the Nantucket Memorial Airport Commission. We're meeting entirely by Zoom. The meeting is being both audio and video recorded. All votes tonight will be by roll call. Please take care to mute your microphone when you're not speaking, and to address all comments through the chair and to identify yourself. With that, we'll do roll call of the present commissioners. Ms. Planzer,
Here.
Mr. Levitt,
Here.
Mr. Buscarin,
Here.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Thank you. All present. And with that, are there any questions, comments, concerns with the agenda as drafted and published? Hearing none, we'll consider that adopted by unanimous consent. Proceed. Any comments on the March 10th minutes? Mr. Levitt.
I see that we have the minutes from the March 10th meeting, but our most recent meeting was on the 24th. And I was hoping we'd have some continuity where we would have the minutes from the last meeting that we were at. Was just trying to understand why those weren't included.
Are those still in process for the next meet? Can we have those for the next meeting?
Yes, I'm still drafting them. I'll have them prepared for you the next commission meeting.
Thank you. Any other questions? And I would just say that with the on to that point, while it was because it was only 2 weeks, but with the publishing of the packet, I can understand that also cut that timeline a little bit short. Thanks. Any other questions related to the March 10th minutes? Hearing none, we'll consider those adopted by unanimous consent. We need to ratify the the warrants of March 18th and April 1st. Is there such a motion or any questions?
So moved.
Is there a second? Motion's been made and seconded. Any further comments for discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That'll bring us to public comment for any items which are not on the agenda. You could raise your virtual hand or... No. Okay, hearing none. That will take us to pending leases contracts set forth on Exhibit 1, incorporated by reference, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Smith. If we could share the screen for Exhibit 1, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Going right down the list, the first one is the lease agreement between the United States of America General Services Administration, or federally known as the TSA, and for their lease agreement of their space for their offices, their break room, and their training room. It was negotiated a 3% annual increase over the next 10 years for roughly $40,000, 205. The next one is the license agreement for the ACK Surf School, just the standard $1,500 license agreement for them to operate this season on Nobodere Beach. The next one is the operating agreement with Unify Aviation, who provides the ground handling for United Airlines, Delta Airlines, and JetBlue for, of course, $1,500. The next one is the contract with DJ Products for an aircraft caddy tug that helps to relocate small and medium-sized aircraft used at our common use hangars. That one's for $14,736.92. The license agreement with Slade Aviation. This is an amendment to their lease that would allow for the 3 parking spaces at $1,500 a piece for a grand total of $4,500. The next one is the contract amendment, or sorry, the contract with McFarland Johnson for the task order for the MEPA NEPA for $788,448. One thing to note with that one is that we do have a grant, May 1st deadline grant for that one. Hence why we're presenting it tonight for you. I know it's a big, huge project. It's got basically our CIP, the environmental for our CIP for the next 3 years coming due on our of all our projects. So it is a lot of reading. I know hopefully you can get a chance to read it, or if you haven't, to good luck and try reading it. It is a lot, but it is a large project, and it is grant eligible for that one. And then, of course, the last one is the contract amendment with McFarland Johnson for the tank compliance services, as is required for us to have with Mass DOT. That one's for $133,000, 133,495. So I seek for your approval or any questions you may have with those.
Thank you. And I will add that I do see we have a couple members of the public interested parties related to the sublease for the FedEx, which is grayed out as not ready. And what I would propose that we should do would be to discuss and contemplate the uh, leases and contracts that were just reviewed by Mr. Smith, and then take a couple minutes to go over the sublease and hear from those present if they would had any input. Back to the pending contracts and leases as described by Mr. Smith. I would start off that I had some concern with the task order related to the environmental permitting. Not so much, I would say, specific concern other than the scope being so large, and having just got it really to read basically Sunday night with all of our capital projects. So I'm hoping that we could hear a little bit more from Mr. Lasden. Mr. Smith, you mentioned that there's a grant deadline of May 1st. And again, I'm not just the whole commission could weigh on it, but it's such a sizable project and contract. I thought that the commission should take a couple of minutes just to consider it, given that it is going to cover all of the listed CIPs, some of which may or may not proceed. So, Mr. Lasden, could you explain the deadline that you're facing and what alternatives the commission may have if in fact we wanted to get more information?
Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, so there is a May 1 grant deadline. I did reach out to the FAA to see if we could do a couple things, if we could either extend the deadline, and they weren't able to give me an answer today. They said they'd give me an answer tomorrow. The other thing I had suggested to the airport manager is if it's acceptable, maybe the commission have a special commission meeting in 2 weeks. So that way you could spend the time to review it, and you could have the commission meeting on what would be the 28th, and the grants are due May 1st. But the FAA New England region standard grant protocol is all grants are due on May 1st. And if it's a construction project, it's with an open bid from a contractor. And if it's a professional services contract, it's after it's been approved by the state and feds and yourself and had an IFE completed on it, which this has been completed. So just to, I guess, to step back, when we create these type of projects, and I'm expressing this out loud for the commission as a whole. These projects show up on our CIP, so every year we know they're coming. And then when we go to start the project, we have a scoping meeting with the FAA and the state so that we can create and the airport. And so we have a scoping meeting to determine what should be in the scope and what the outcome of the scope wants to be. And then we craft the scope and we send it in for review to all three parties, yourself, the state, and the federal government. And it's reviewed along the way. And then when the scope is finalized, then it goes out for an IFE. And then we negotiate should we have to on the IFE, and then it's presented as final, which is where it is today. But again, if you are looking to spend some more time reading it, as I said before, I did speak to the FAA, and I believe there is an option for you to have a special town meeting if the FAA comes back tomorrow and says that they can't extend the grant deadline. If we could have a special commission meeting on the 28th, that would provide the means to get this approved prior to the grant deadline.
Thank you for that. I don't know that that will be necessary. I just
Yep.
wanted to be sure that the entire
Yep.
commission, for something of this magnitude, that we, have a discussion and fully get additional information, as you've explained. Now, one of the questions that I have is, if as we proceed after this, we've made our grant application, and the commission determines that a particular project may not proceed. And I'm just going to put one out as an example. Say the Thompson House is listed.
Yep.
And, so there would be no real need to do environmental then. Is it, we would not do that work then? Is there time to make such a determination and then simply recognize the savings from not doing that? Or this is, I saw it listed as lump sum, but I know that
That is so.
you have
Sure.
progress billing. So is
Yeah.
it is it typical that it's a not to exceed, or is it, I guess, lump sum?
So it is lump sum, and so yes, if and to talk sort of in general, the whole document is intermingled together, and so there are 15 projects in this document. So, if we decide that we're not going to do a couple of the documents, we can absolutely work with you on reducing the scope and fee. Absolutely.
That works for me.
Yeah.
I'll open it up for everybody else. I just wanted to take a few
Yeah.
minutes on this. Does anybody else have any questions or comments on this particular contract, Mr. Levitt?
One of my concerns about this one and the other MJ task order in here is I understand that the MJ agreement with the commission expires the end of May and they've got a bid in for renewing it. What happens if we issue this task order that's awarded to them, but the professional service contract is switched to another vendor? Do we now end up with two professional service firms working for us in June who may or may not be coordinated?
Would you like me to
Yes, please,
respond?
Mr. Lasden.
So,
Yeah.
Mr. Levitt, interesting question, and we've had that question with a lot of towns and with Brian Turbot on your town. So our task orders would survive the expiration of the master agreement, but we would not be able to amend anything or change anything after if we are not selected again, then our task orders would survive until they're completed, but we wouldn't be able to amend anything. And
Okay.
so yes, if you do hire another consultant, you would have two consultants. It's not uncommon for airports to have two consultants. In fact, Nantucket in the past has had two consultants for many, many years. The current contract that we are working on, Nantucket had actually selected a second firm and they declined to accept the contract. Prior to that, there were always, when we've been around, there have always been two consultants on board.
So, having been in the consulting business, I love the fact that you encourage your clients to hire multiple consultants, what we used to call the Consultants Full Employment Act. But being on the other side of it, I'm not sure we want to be funding multiple consulting firms. And please don't take this the wrong way, but it seems like this is potentially a backdoor way of MJ getting an extended contract with us as their existing agreement is expiring. I didn't read the whole contract, but it looked like a 3-year agreement. And even though Brian says that we can enter into it and it can extend beyond the term of your basic agreement, I'm just a little troubled at the timing of your master agreement is about to expire, and this is essentially giving you a 3-year extension if we grant it to you.
I'm sorry. Let me just try to understand. You're not giving me a 3-year extension. If we sign this one task order, it is the one task order for the MIPA NEPA that would survive the. So if you don't reselect MJ, the tasks that we have on hand, we would complete and then we would walk away. But you're not extending our contract. The new selection that's out on the street is for a 3-year term, and the FAA encourages sponsors like yourself to have between 3 and 5 years. They don't like sponsors going more than 5 years on the selection of a consultant firm. So in the past, you being Nantucket, have done 3 years. Other airports that we have as clients go 5 years. Some of them go three with two 1-year extensions, but the 3 to 5 year term for the consulting services is pretty standard. But we would not get an extension by signing this task order. This task order would only be for this one particular item and any other existing contracts that we have. But you could not enter into new agreements with us if you don't reselect us again.
I understand that. And then my second question is, can you explain why on such a long and complex contract, it's only being given to us 2 weeks before a decision has to be made on it in order to get the funding? Is there something that held up getting it to us sooner?
As I explained earlier, it has been sent to the airport for review and the state and federal government for review throughout the process, and the airport staff has been looking at it and has made comments.
Okay, so just so
But
I understand, so the
yep,
airport staff has had it for some time,
yes,
and it's only coming to the commission now, 2 weeks ahead. Is that correct?
it's coming now because of the process of completing the IFE and completing the scope and fee. Um, Projects are May 1 in the New England region. May 1 is the grant application deadline. And so it has to be before May 1.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Lazen. Okay. Any further discussion? Mr. Marks.
I just want to say if this is a concern with what's in there, I would suggest that that we schedule the meeting on the 28th, like Mr. Lazen suggested, and then it gives us 2 weeks to and I don't know if we can provisionally vote tonight, and then if there's any, and then have at that meeting, and if we don't need that meeting, then we just wouldn't have it because we've already provisionally approved it. I don't know if that's possible or not. You know what I mean?
Well, I guess I would say we could certainly give a sense, of where we're headed. My point in raising this was twofold. One, which I meant to raise as well, was the pending engineering contract situation, but also just to highlight the amount of projects that were in there and to have an understanding. Given the grant deadline that we are against, and that it's likely we're going to move forward with 80 or 90% of those projects. I don't know, unless we were going to somehow on the 28th, by the 28th, decide that we were looking for some kind of revision to both the CIP and then how we would have MJ redo the IFEs and everything else. I'm not so sure we can sort of undo all of that. And I don't know that it really is gonna, get us anywhere by waiting 2 weeks. I have a better understanding now, and I hope the commission and public does as well on this, but I don't know that anything is gonna change myself, but I'm open to discussion on that. What would we actually accomplish or change by then, putting it off further, given the stage that it's at, and we essentially cannot proceed with any of the capital projects without the NEPA, MEPA, and some of the natural heritage stuff that's in there as well. Mr. Buscarin,
I think we should go ahead and approve it the way it is.
is that a motion?
So moved.
Well, I guess the motion would be, first off, so it would be to approve all of the pending contracts and leases as outlined by Mr. Smith, and then we could have a second on the motion, and then we could have further discussion. Is that your motion?
Yes, sir.
And is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. So, Mr. Levitt, for further discussion.
I just had a couple of questions on some
Sure.
of the other items on here if we're
Yep.
approving them all at once. Let me just try and quickly go through them. On the TSA agreement, which is a 10-year agreement, the terminal optimization is going to change the space that they have in there. Is there a provision in this lease that when the office space that we're leasing them, as specified in this lease, goes away or moves, does the lease blow up? Are we not able to move their office because we're under contract to them? How is that accommodated in this lease?
Mr. Smith?
Billy, did we ask for that? I could have sworn that came up.
We have a provision under the TSA lease that we are required to provide TSA, and if we go to do a new terminal, we have to provide space for the TSA offices. This is the only one provision that we have under the TSA.
So although there are drawings attached to the lease of the space that they're getting, there is a clause in there that allows us to replace that?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I believe so.
There is a space that we have to provide. Airport have to provide to TSA for offices.
So, in other words, I think the question is, what would be the mechanism under the lease by which we would revise their space if we wanted to move them? Am I understanding that correctly, Mr. Levitt?
Yes, I'm just concerned that we're entering a 10-year contract for space that we know is not going to be there in 3 or 4 years. I mean, there will be space for them, but
I guess the question
the
is
space that they've marked on the plan.
right. What is the provision by which the commission maintains landlord rights to revise the leased premises? I think would be what we would be looking for. And is there, if we need another, month on this, if in fact to make sure that legal can ensure us of that, if it's not there, if Mr. Smith, do you have that?
Sorry, I'm just trying to go back to my notes. I could have sworn we had brought that up, but I'm not seeing any response back from legal on that. So, yeah, I do believe with the trying to remember with the optimization, I do believe that we would have to add space. I don't think with the current space they're in, well, I could be wrong. I have to go back and look at that. But yeah, I don't see that answer. I could have sworn we'd asked that from the legal. So yeah, if we want to dig into that and get you an answer there, I can do that for sure.
So, Mr. Buscarin, are you fine with friendly amendment to remove that from the motion? Or do you want to proceed?
Well, I'm just suggesting when you have a contract for 10 years, implicit in a 10-year contract would be unintended consequences or I would say small changes which could be, modified by both parties without much problem. I don't see that as a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how you would, unless you had language, I don't know how that allows for that revision, which has to be, I would think, in there of some manner similar to what Mr. Buscarin just said, that subject to the landlord and tenant mutually agreeing, how we would define an area that we don't know what that would be yet.
Well, I've seen other leases where there was a clause in there that if there's a major change to the facility, the landlord's responsible for providing substantially similar space, something along those lines. And this is a situation where we know this is going to happen prior to us signing the lease. I don't think later on we could say after the lease was signed, we decided we were going to remodel the terminal.
Go ahead, Mr.
This is-
Buscarin.
Is the space bigger, smaller, or the same size? The new space we give them.
Mr. Lasden.
If it's the same size or bigger, I don't think we have a problem.
It is materially the same size. Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chair, so it is here on page 6, 2.05 relocation rights. It's part of the lease agreement. It says if it becomes necessary in the orderly development of the airport, lessor may require the relocation of premises to other space at the airport, which is the reasonable judgment of lessor, is similar and suitable for the purpose for which this lease is entered, as such purposes are set forth herein.
Thank you. Mr. Levitt, does that work? or-
Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
I said I
appreciate
just wanted
working
to
through
see
that.
it.
These are important points.
Right.
Mr. Levitt, did you have further questions?
Yeah, I had just a couple more things. Warren, you indicated that we were agreeing on the Unify Aviation Agreement. It's grayed out on the exhibit and it was not included in the package.
I
Yeah,
have the
yeah.
newest exhibit showing as
We
of
had a
this
handout.
morning. Huh?
Am I working off an old version?
You might be.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize. Okay, my third minor thing on the DJ Products contract. In the initial recital of the contract, airport is misspelled, meaning every time that you use that as a capitalized term elsewhere, it doesn't apply.
Okay.
Can we fix that before we sign it, please?
Sure. You bet.
My next item on the Slate Aviation lease, it looks like we're signing a 4-year lease that doesn't have any escalation in it. We change the rate for parking spaces every year. This would lock us into this rate, and even though it's a relatively small amount, the concept that we've discussed before of not having escalators in there or having somebody who's paying below the current rate doesn't seem equitable to me.
Mr. Chair, through you, if I may.
Yes, please.
The parking spots are actually listed in our rates and charges. So if next year, if the commission would like to increase that, we could do it in December to the public hearing, announce that we increase that rate, and then in January you vote on it. So next we could change that and we could charge them more for parking.
Except the contract is written, it's hard coded in there as an annual fee of $1,500, as opposed to having it drafted as the then current annual fee for parking, which would cause it to be dragged along with the increase that everybody else faces.
So that seems like a reasonable revision. Can we make that to the contract, or is it and for approval for tonight, or is that something that would have to be held and reviewed with them first? It seemed like we could make that revision, and if it wasn't acceptable to them, those terms, then it could come back to the commission next month.
Yeah.
Does that work?
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Mr. Levitt, does that work for you?
Right. Simple.
Okay. Any more? Mr. Levitt, did you have any more questions?
Nope.
Okay.
I'm good.
So with that, there was a motion on the table. Any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
Mr. Levitt,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And then we will briefly go to the FedEx contract, which was not ready. Mr. Smith, do you want to give a little background on this?
Yeah, the background on this is it is kind of a unique situation, something that I don't think the airport has ever gone through before, but it's basically a sublease within a sublease. And FedEx had presented it to the airport commission with the intent to put in a local vendor. Poets Corner, I'm unfamiliar with. Only haven't been here on the island for a year. You guys probably know a little bit better than I do. But it's to assume that space there in the front of the building slash hangar. That's what we call Hangar 1, for basically like a mini retail space slash shipping business, printing shipping business there, in that area. And of course, like I said, it's a sublease within a sublease. And I hope that that makes sense. I know I had presented this slide deck to the commissioners to give a better understanding of what the space is. And of course, as with all subleases, it is up to the commission to decide whether it's an appropriate use of the space to approve any of these subleases, or now subleases.
Okay. And Mr. Peel, you made the application. We're always happy to hear from the public and from our tenants. I would ask that you please keep it respectful. Understand that as the staff has put it to us and through legal, it's essentially not ready for consideration on the basis of that we have the Brookfield Assets as our actual tenant, and as I understand it, the current lease differs from the proposed operation. Again, if you'd like to, sort of explain your position a bit, we're always happy to hear from you and want to know that, we respect FedEx as a tenant and Poets Corner as a local business. But we also have to, follow all requirements from the perspective of the airport in terms of entering into these leases. So, Mr. Peel.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me speak. Can you guys hear me okay? I got a new
Yes, sir.
speaker.
Please proceed.
So thank you. Let me just take a quick step back and just kind of explain to you guys how we ended up here. And I'll make it quick. So essentially about 2 years ago, FedEx launched its FedEx One initiative. And that's really taking the FedEx ground side. And I'm sorry, for the record, my name is Matthew Peel. I am the operations manager and I oversee all the operations facilities for FedEx on Nantucket. So again, FedEx launched its FedEx One initiative, taking the FedEx Ground brand and the FedEx Express brand and essentially just merging it into one company. Kind of like UPS is just UPS, we are just now FedEx. And so it reduces redundancies. You don't have two drivers going to the same stops, improves efficiency, and so on. It just makes sense as a business model. So with that, there was a whole bunch of stations, and they're leaning more towards the ground model, which is a contract model. That's what we run out of our facility on 9 Nancy Ann Lane. That's where my office is. We did about a $4 million remodel over there. So originally, this station was slated to be shut down. In some talks and some casual talks with Noah, when Noah was the airport manager, we were at Cub Scouts one day and he said, well, I believe your lease is tied to your parking spots on the tarmac as well. And so did some further investigation. We found out that that is true. And so that's why we decided to keep this building in play. Now with this, we are also working on, we are the only carrier on Nantucket that actually flies its packages in. So UPS brings over everything over on the boat. We fly everything in that comes through the Air Express and so on. In the summertime, we're seeing up to 3 flights a day. We're flying a 208 Cessna in. It only holds about 2,000 pounds. Like I said, we are averaging probably 5,000 to 6,000 pounds a day of freight that we fly in. So we are also in the process of upgrading to the 408 right now, which will be a bigger Cessna, can hold about 6,000 pounds of freight and also take some equipment to unload it as well. So it was in our best interest to keep this building and eventually do some remodels to it when we do upgrade to the 408 and bring in some equipment, probably put a bigger door on the back of the hangar there so we can drive things in and out, things like that. We'll go through all that process when we come. We're probably still about a year out from the 408 right now. So we did shut down that counter there. I'm sure you guys remember it, Dick Fiscus and everything running that counter. And so we had that counter space available. And since we decided to keep this station for the lease, the remainder of the lease, and probably, if not longer, because, you know, FedEx isn't going anywhere, and we want to continue to serve this island. I saw this space as a good opportunity. Nate was always interested in this space when he heard that we shut down. And I've been in a lot of communication because now Poets Corner is the only shipping counter on island. And so he knew that we had the space available. We found out we were keeping this. He showed interest. So I reached out to Brookfield. I reached out to FedEx, and they said it's a great idea. You know, we're still going to be using the station for the operation. So about 75% of the building and the tarmac parking and all of that is being used for FedEx operation. The counter space that was previously a shipping counter was just going to be essentially taken over by Poets Corner and operate the same way as it did before. So I think that's why we're a little miffed, I guess you could say, on exactly how we're moving forward here and the change of use, because we don't necessarily see a huge difference in use there. And so, you know, this benefits a business owner. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Poets Corner, where it is now. It's on Amelia Drive. It's a narrow road. He only has about 4 parking spaces. We have 8 parking spaces. It's a lot easier to get in and out right there to the current space, or to the FedEx old counter space there. And so we thought this was just kind of easy transition. Let a small business owner get in there for the remainder of our lease, if not longer, and we'll cross that road when it comes to 2032. And so that's kind of brings us up to today. And so we were just trying to get him to move in there and benefit him. Well, we're still kind of working on upgrading of the plane, our operations. We're still going to be doing operations out of there. We're looking at even putting a lounge for our pilots or something for them to rest in there, because currently they rent a house off island to rest at during the day. And so, yeah, and so that's why we didn't see a large change of use. And then when we heard this, and I got the emails from the attorney the other day, it's yesterday, it became very concerning for us because it looked like we were being pushed towards some sort of renegotiation on the master lease, that they were trying to get, you know, it'd be a possible adjustment to a market rate or something like that, which Brookfield will never go for and FedEx will never go for. And so the alternative is that space just sits empty till at least 2032. And we don't want to see that happen. We want to help out a small business owner here on Nantucket. We want to have people, you know, we want to be able to utilize that space as much as possible. And so, and that's kind of where we're at today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Mr. Smith, in terms of the master lease, could you explain what that allows for the sublease for an operation? And I guess I would ask, in your opinion, is what has been proposed consistent with that?
Well, the master lease states FedEx Freight Facility. And again, unfortunately for my limited understanding, because I don't know I've never been to Poets Corner. I've never walked in. I mean, the only thing I can assume is other shipping facilities that I've been to in my life, where you go in, you can purchase products there to package, you can purchase bubble wrap type stuff. And I don't know if that clearly defines that that's what a freight facility is. In that sense, that's my only question and my concern is, does that mirror that?
So they have a website and they offer printing and copying. And to me, what I want to make sure is that any action taken by the commission is consistent with the master lease. And as I understand it, and it's basically because we've had to ask for this additional information, and then I really appreciate you guys pulling that together. And the question that I feel like needs to be resolved, and the commission can discuss it, and you can discuss it. This isn't to try to, put somebody. It's to make sure that what we do as we enter into these long-term leases is consistent, and benefits the airport, right, as well, right? As much as you speak about a small business, I respect also as a small business owner the challenges of operating on Nantucket. But as we sit here as a commission, we have fiduciary duty to also protect the airport. And, at this point, there's been significant staff time and legal expenses incurred as a result of the sublease. And I think that gets to some of the even this discussion. So we have to make sure that as we do this, that we're all meeting our duties. And the question that came up, I believe, on legal review was, that the scope and services provided by Poets Corner as a retail facility and copying exceeds that which would be considered a freight facility. And I think that, as I understand it, is one of the points that we're at. And if we were to try to make this, work with you, then we have to work through a revise to make sure that the master lease is consistent with the subleased area. So that's where I understand this is, where the difference is in the language and the operation. And so I felt that, and I think staff and legal, is that we need to understand exactly how to do this in the legal manner. So that's been my understanding. And as much as I appreciate your background, I wanted to give you, to have an open discussion. And I see Mr. Roberts here as well. And then also give commissioners a chance to weigh in on this as well. Any commissioners have anything that they, I'll come back to you, Mr. Peel. Mr. Buscarin.
What's wrong with novating the lease to accommodate the situation? And there might be some financial recompense for that.
So that might be where we end up, I think, on this. And I think that's part of the discussion, but that's what we have said isn't really ready tonight, because if in fact we need to revise that lease to make all of these pieces fall together. So that's where we're, trying to reconcile. And that's why it was grayed out. Typically, Mr. Peel, we wouldn't even have this discussion on something that we didn't see as ready. But, out of respect for you, FedEx, and Mr. Roberts, as a, local business, as a current tenant, I thought it was only fair for you to not think that we were just not trying to work through this, but also that it's fair that the entire commission has a chance to weigh in on this. And so that would be one option. And I think that we should, hear from everybody, and then we can, discuss, and you can let us know. You had made a comment, Mr. Peel, that nobody will go for it. Well, we have to make sure, like, that's our duty, that the leases are aligned with the uses, right? That we can't enter into something that's contradictory to a sublease when the master lease, and you said that, they're okay with it. Well, again, we need to paper that. There's more to it in these long-term leases and dealing with, and please remember, this is also an aeronautical use property that we converted, and it's, out of the ordinary. And it was very much in deference to, FedEx as providing that air freight, and that it was a quasi, through the fence type of an operation. So there's a lot of factors that I think have to be considered here, but we have to make sure that, everything is, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And that's not in any way to try to put you off. And so, as well as to make sure that, yes, we have incurred, significant time and expense in this, in subleases, and we do have sublease guidelines to discuss on how, somebody doing a sublease to a sublease shouldn't cost the airport money, right? I mean, I think you could appreciate that, essentially there's nothing coming back there. So, and it's not that it should be. So I think those are all factors that have to be considered here as this has gone on. Any other commissioners wish to weigh in on this? Mr. Marks.
Yeah, so I apologize if I missed it there. Is Poets Corner then going to act as an agent for FedEx when they're in there? to accept packages that would then be shipped? And if so, then it falls in line with what's there,
It
as opposed
does.
to just being printing and all that
And
stuff.
I think, and Mr.
Seems
Peel,
that
I'll
it's lending itself that way.
come
right?
back to you after everybody has spoke, as you can answer, I think, everything. But yes, my understanding is exactly that, which is that my sense is if that was the only operation that was proposed and it was strictly the shipping counter, then it would be more in line with the master lease. But there's a retail component to the additional use. So as we contemplate approval of a sublease that changes that, I think that that's a fine point that needs to be discussed. If they're moving their entire operation, as I understand it, right? So it's not just the shipping, it's all of the printing, the brochures, all of their business would become into that space. That was and we weren't, sure of that until pretty recently when we received the additional information. So I think that that's part of and the master lease says freight facility. Mr. Levitt?
Sure. I just have a couple of issues here. I've got up on my screen the Poets Corner website, and it shows that there are two businesses there. There's Poets Corner Press, which does all of the printing. And by the way, they do a fantastic job. I've been a very happy customer for a while. And they also have Sally's Shipping Counter. If this discussion was just about moving Sally's Shipping Counter over, then I believe it comports with the master lease. The master lease has a very short section on permitted use. It is, quote, Federal Express Freight Facility, unquote. But we're now talking about adding a print shop to it, which was not included in the initial lease. And I'm concerned about the unfairness to other retail tenants at the airport. Right now, anybody else who operates a retail business at the airport pays an annual $1,500 business fee and pays us a percentage of the gross of the sales. So this seems like a backdoor way for a business to come in under another business and not paying a separate annual business fee or paying a percentage of the retail sales. And if when that master lease was done with Brookfield 6 years ago, the belief was that a business like this would be operated there. I believe back then FedEx had a subsidiary called Kinko's. Then this lease would have been drafted differently under different terms. So if FedEx now wants to change that, it requires changing the lease. My second issue is, although we want to try and accommodate all small businesses on the island, our counterparty is Brookfield. And anybody that we'd be negotiating with to modify or change the lease needs to be Brookfield, not a subtenant or a sub-subtenant, who I don't believe is sitting here with their power of attorney. And then my last point is, because this is complex, we've given it to our real estate counsel to work out with instructions to try and work it out as quickly as possible. And since those discussions are ongoing with the legal counsel, it seems to me that that's the most appropriate place for the discussions to continue and be wrapped up. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Roberts, I saw that your hand went up and it was did you wish to speak?
Yeah, if you don't mind for just a
No,
second.
please.
Sure. Yeah, so my website does have, it says Sally Shipping Counter. That is just the name of our counter since we've had the FedEx shipping facility. That's in honor of my mother who passed. And but the business itself is Poets Corner Press, and it is a FedEx authorized ship center. We're in the FedEx network. So we do have those FedEx ties. I understand the concern about moving the printing out there in the back, which is behind closed doors, which is kind of like if you, Mr. Levitt's been here, but I don't recognize anyone else that's kind of walked through. But we have a sliding door up. You walk in. It's a shipping counter with a little bit of tape, boxes for sale, things like that. And then in the back, 550 square feet or so, we do all of our printing. So that's what I was looking to do in the back out there, only because I can't afford to have this place and that and separate my two businesses. And mainly because I only have 3 employees. So that's kind of my thing with it. So yes, it does say Sally Shipping Counter on there, but you can ignore that as another business. It's not an LLC. That's just the physical name of my shipping counter.
Thank you for the additional information. And again, Mr. Roberts, I think from the perspective of the airport, and customers of your business that, we understand but our position has to be that the leases have to be done in a way that is consistent across all tenants and consistent with the legal language. And so I understand you're up against a time line, but perhaps with some more time and working through with Brookfield and legal, there's a way that we can get to yes and make this happen, and maybe it's for a future season for you or some other alternative. This isn't but I think we have to fully understand as well, there's the printing operation, but I think that if in fact we were going to allow a both printing operation and retail use, that's all got to be subject to that renegotiation.
Understood. That's all above me. I'm sitting in the cheap seats.
And that's where I think it's just not as much as Mr. Peel, I appreciate thought this would just be a simple thing, but is the details of these things in the legal and regulatory world and one of fairness across all of our tenants is something that I think the commission has to be, very, very cognizant of. So I hope that this explanation was helpful. And, if you want to, we're going to have a further discussion on sublease guidelines. Again, subleases in general should be an exception and not typically a norm, but, we're willing to consider a case by case basis. And I think that, if you want to continue to work on this in terms of how the to show that it would be in fact compliant with the operation with the master lease and or modification, then that is something that we might be able to entertain, and it's going to be subject to the same as any other retail operation. And perhaps your retail sales are minimal, as they said, or maybe that we don't have all of that information. So I think
are you asking the retail sales of what gets sold at the shipping counter or what comes in via my email for my printing business? Because it's basically like an 85-15 split, or that's getting better now. But what would you be referring to? The whole
I think my sense is would all have to be up for discussion as part of the renegotiation of a lease term, which I don't think should happen, particularly at the table here. There should be a proposal and perhaps through legal, but I couldn't directly answer that. I think that at a minimum we have to make sure we're consistent. Out of Mr. Levitt's point is a good one, that in terms of there is general fairness that as the commission in our position as a landlord with a lot of leases that we manage, we have to be consistent across those. So perhaps you guys could work with staff and legal, and then also, like I say, we have a further discussion that might help guide how not just specific to you, but how the commission considers all subleases. So with that, I think we should probably move on, but I wanted to, be sure that we gave you a chance to discuss, there's multiple sides of where we're coming at, and it's not to just simply say no, it's to make sure that everybody's treated fairly and that all of the legal paperwork is done, which I hope you can appreciate. So
yeah, no, real quick, I appreciate that. That's kind of why I came on, and I appreciate everything Matt said. And then yeah, I don't know a thing about anyone else's lease, nor do I care to. I'm just looking to continue my partnership with FedEx because it also makes things easier for Matt as well. But yeah, I get that this is the first I've heard of the fairness of the other leases with a percentage. I get that. So that's nice to know and hear. I'm interested in still trying to work through it and figure it out. I don't want to cost the airport money. I don't want to cost FedEx or Brookfield money. I'm just, not to sound selfish, I'm looking out for my business. I'm in a spot that I own, so I'm not out on the street. This particular spot at the airport is just great visibility for my FedEx ship counter, which is what I'm trying to grow. I'm kind of maxed out for printing and I'm in a good spot, but I'm looking to grow the FedEx part of it.
Okay, we appreciate that. And perhaps as, with some time, we maybe could figure this out. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And with that, we will move on to sublease guidelines. So as a result of some of the, not just this one, there's been, there's a couple that were pending. Commissioner Levitt had worked on drafting a suggestion for the commission. Mr. Levitt, would you care to present this?
Sure.
Or would you rather have Mr. Smith do it? Either way, I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. I appreciate your efforts, and I thought you should have due recognition for them.
No, it might be easy for me to just walk through it since I drafted it. This is the result of a few versions that have gone back and forth with our real estate counsel, Jennifer Platt at Anderson Krieger. And it came out of a number of subleases that came to us that as we looked at them, we realized that we had long-term leases with a number of tenants who were in a nice position that every year their rent went down. And it went down because they were subleasing out pieces of their property for more and more money, but they were locked into a low rate with us. So while the market continued to move up, the airport was not getting any benefit from it. And there it seemed to be a bit of unfairness in what was going on. So in talking to Jennifer, it seemed that we should try and lay out what guidelines should be for master leases going forward, understanding that we don't have the ability to go in and revise existing leases unless there's a change to them, such as in this Brookfield lease where they want to change the permitted use. But it gives both staff and real estate counsel some guidelines on what they should be looking for as they're putting new leases together, with the overall theory being that if the market's increasing, we should participate in that along with our tenants. If our tenants aren't going to be using the property and are going to be leasing all of it out, we're not trying to set up a shopping mall that somebody else is going to run, and that we should be conscious about all of the businesses on the airport being under the same type of fees so that there's fairness amongst them. And this is focusing on particularly retail businesses as opposed to those with aeronautical use that happen to be sitting on our property. And if we look at some of the different leases out there now, we can see that some of them have things in common. That, for instance, they pay us an annual business fee, they pay us a percentage of the gross. And I think the enumerated items here are pretty straightforward. The first thing, of course, is to make sure before we get into any discussion with them that they're not in default and they're current. One of the subleases in front of us now, it turns out that there are some potentially serious defaults in the lease. So we've kind of put that on hold and given the tenant an opportunity to resolve those. As Art pointed out, we also are spending a lot of time on this, both ourselves and our counsel. And that shouldn't be for our account, but it should be for the tenant or subtenant's account. And the suggested way to ensure that that happens is one, to make sure they're serious. They need to put up upfront $1,000 application fee to cover the airport's costs, and then pay the legal expenses. We're going to be getting legal bills from Anderson and Krieger for these subleases. And under our current arrangement, we pay for those, not the tenant. So where a tenant's going to be making money on these subleases, they should be using some of that to pay for the expenses. And then the other items we have on here. This, by the way, is no means intended to be a hard policy. It's designed to give our council and staff opportunity to negotiate each lease, but it's giving them guidelines to follow as they're getting into lease negotiations. That's the background.
Thank you for that summary, the efforts on that. Commissioners, if you had a chance to review this, and is it something that you have any input, suggested revisions, or is it something that everybody's comfortable with adopting? Mr. Marks.
Yeah, I just feel like on the percent share, there should be a percentage of their net income that is not part of that, like earnings above a certain level, right? Depending upon the space, where this could be unburdensome to some smaller businesses, perhaps. I know that's been done in the past, where it's you only pay that of earnings over a certain dollar of a certain amount.
I'm not quite following you there. I mean, how do you structure that? I will say that was the only point of the whole thing that I wanted to also discuss, was what that percentage might be, if it's going to be that basis. But based on what you're describing, how would you suggest the wording would look if we were to revise this?
I don't know the exact wording, honestly, but it has to do with something. Okay, I'll give you an example. All right. I'm going to lease 10,000 square feet in the airport lobby there to run that store, and I have to pay a 2%, what is it, 3% in there, or whatever it is, 4% over gross retail sales after earnings of, like, let's say $50,000 as a number, not say that is the number, but that I'm pretty sure that's how, like, a lot of the leases are done downtown as well. And I could be wrong with that, but I recall my cousin telling me that at one point, that you get so much money you don't have to give them a percentage of, and then after you've earned that, then you give them a percentage afterwards. It kind of ensures that you can afford to pay the lease and so on, and then you guys, then we would get a cut after that, the gravy, if you will.
But wouldn't that be inconsistent with the base lease? Because we don't, as I understand it, have that kind of a clause for retail sales in those leases that we have now. Again, I'm happy to have this discussion, and maybe this is for also, this is something that needs to be worked out, having just saw it. But one of the things that strikes me, if we're going to have sublease guidelines, is that it should also have a measure of consistency with the original base lease.
Yes, I agree. And I've seen that in the base lease. That's why I brought it up.
Mr. Levitt?
Two things. First off, trying to include percentages of profit is a terrible idea. It just gets into Hollywood accounting. And all of us have run small businesses and know that we can make that profit number be zero anytime we want. So you really need to run them off of gross sales, which tends to be an industry standard. That 4% number there, by the way, came from our real estate counsel, who said the market is generally 3 to 5%. So I grabbed 4, which was the midpoint. I noticed in the Current this week that the town just renewed the Sandbar lease with Nick, and town is getting 7% of gross sales. So, you could ask around town as to what the percentages are, and they're generally in the single digits.
Okay. And when I said the question on the percentage I wanted to discuss, I was actually hoping to have a quick discussion on item 6, but let's stay on this point. Mr. Buscarin, you had your hand up. You're muted, though.
Okay. Okay, there we go. No, I'm in general agreement with Mr. Levitt's approach. That's all I'm saying.
Okay. And the 75-25, Mr. Levy, could you give us a little, more background on that? How, I'm not saying it's something I disagree with. I just thought that, would it be 50-50, 75-25, 66-67-33? I'm just wondering is there any particular basis for that?
I thought it was a good place to start if it's going to
Okay,
be
fair enough.
negotiated.
I just didn't know if there was I just thought that,
But
is that, I think that point is one of the main concerns that I have. Not, I mean, all of the points that you bring up are valid ones that as we've grown and learned in working through these, right? That essentially, if we don't have something like this in place, we're starting to operate at a loss to the airport, to some, as you said, someone else benefit, not only for the their but when we're dealing and having to put resources, both staff time and legal, into something that you're not actually recognizing any greater ROI on that, or just not even if it's not investment but a return. We're the airport, as the landlord and property owner, is essentially receiving the same rent you would have received if you didn't do the sublease, but now it just cost you a bunch of time and money and potential additional headaches. So that's where I think that, something like this, sets forth a way to be sure that we're protecting the airport's position in doing this. And I like the idea that it's um, these are guidelines, and it's ultimately, to your point, Mr. Marks, let's say a particular tenant made the case that that's why they were, it should be 4% over $50,000 of gross retail sales, or what have you. The commission could negotiate that. That could be in the final lease. These guidelines are simply that. It's a starting point, I think, for the negotiate, and it would set forth reasonable expectations to any prospective subtenant to understand what would be involved and what they would have to get into. So
Art, I just want to clarify one
yeah,
thing because we were very careful on that language that talked about the 75-25 was the excess of the prime lease.
right. It's like
So
the
for
delta,
instance, right. So for instance, if they're currently paying us $100 a month on the base rent and they sublet it for $200 a month, we would get 75. They'd
That's
get
right.
125.
Yep. That's
So,
what that would,
and my thought was, basically they're acting as a broker to lease out our space. So they should get something that looks more like a commission than what an owner would get.
that's right. Makes sense to me. Any other questions or further discussion on the guidelines? I think this is something, is there a motion to adopt the sublease guidelines? And could we stop the screen share, please? And thank you for doing that. It was very helpful. Now I can see everybody. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Levitt,
Aye.
Mr. Marks,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. And thank you all for that. Hopefully that's helpful. Mr. Smith, I should have asked earlier. I'm sorry, you're supportive of the guidelines.
Absolutely, yeah, and I'll make sure that I get this to our staff and make sure that we're implementing these right away.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to our PFAS investigation update. Would you like me to go straight to Ms. Collins, or Mr. Smith? Did you have something?
Oh, is she on tonight?
She is. Nice
She
to
is
see you,
on
Ms.
tonight.
Collins. The
Sorry,
floor is yours.
Sorry, I was like, I'll have a story if you'd like to hear about that later. But yeah, so PFAS is we have three 6 homes that we're currently working with. So we have 2 on Mattaketchan Valley, and so those ones were recently hooked up. We have one on I want to say it's Nobody Farm, and that one just got its is in a pending contract, and then another one on sorry, and then another one on 6 Evergreen, and that one we still are working on getting a contract for, and then the last one is on sorry, let me check my notes. But yeah, we have one more, and that one is on sorry, let me look at this. Is one Monahanset, and that one is connected. So basically, we have only two left that need to be constructed, and sorry, and then the one on 90 Skyline, that one is anticipated to start soon. So really, we only have one more that needs to be to have a response from, and we are working on trying to get in touch with them. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and to add a little bit more context, so the one on One Nobadeer Farm, they want to use the same contractor that did the homes on Mattakeshan Valley. However, they were waiting till those were completed to then move forward. And of course, since those have not been completed, we should be ready to run that one any day now. We're anticipating that's going to be imminent. And then, yes, with the 6 Evergreen home, the airport has drafted up a certified letter to be delivered and should have been delivered last week to the residences there. And so we're just awaiting to hear word back from them, but that has already been put into motion.
Okay, please keep us posted at the next meeting if that hasn't moved forward.
For sure.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Collins. Terminal optimization.
Yeah, we had a massing meeting roughly about a week and a half ago with Fenwick McCready, the architect who is doing the design of the terminal optimization project. That went very well. On top of that, the airport had an opportunity to meet with the TSA to discuss the future build out and optimization. The intent, of course, is to repurpose the CBIS area space to potentially accommodate a secondary CBIS machine. In years past, we only have one machine that has been consistently non-reliable is a better choice of words, which really forces the TSA to then hand check all bags, which slows the process down. It creates issues with getting the bags loaded to aircraft on time. So the intent was to be able to provide a secondary CBIS machine. However, due to the volume of passengers and bags that we get here at AC, we don't qualify for a secondary CBIS machine. So there's a couple of ideas that the airport could do. We could, of course, continue to design out the space in anticipation of trying to see if we can get the TSA to approve such a thing, which would be an uphill battle. The second option would be for the airport to flat out purchase a secondary CBIS machine, which we could do. However, the maintenance costs would then fall onto the airport for that through future years. And so that is a discussion that should need to be done with the commission and best how to proceed. I do have our consultant looking at pricing for such a machine. I think initial cost, just kind of rough, was $500,000 to $1 million in that ballpark. So once we get a better idea of how much a machine would cost, and of course just your standard maintenance on top of that, it's something that the commission could look into. But that's all that I have for the terminal optimization updates.
Does anybody have any questions on the terminal? Okay, keep us posted. I had a meeting, I guess I'll just add, as Mr. Smith said, where they kind of ran through architectural type stuff, and hopefully it gets through HDC. Okay, with that, we will move on to the housing production plan, Mr. Smith.
Yeah, with this update, of course, it was given to me to provide a bed plan from the last airport commission meeting. Currently, the airport has 8 beds available in the dorms and 5 at the Thompson House for the season. And so I've been working with ops and FBO management on how to best fill those rooms with the seasonal employees that require the housing. We are still technically in the hiring phase. Right now, we're trying to get as many with the potential to have at least 15 seasonal staff on hand this coming summer. I do believe we're around 10 to 11 at this point. And then, of course, trying to see if all, staff need a bed for the summer, because it does fluctuate year over year. Sometimes we get some seasonals that come in need housing, and sometimes we get seasonals who are robust returners year over year that don't need that bedding. And so we're still kind of working on that to see how we could incorporate full-time staff into a room. Of course, once we give up those rooms to full-time staff, it would be really hard to open that up for the needs of the seasonals that we get. So really, we're looking at that number along with the demand for the full timers that we have. There really isn't much option, if any, to allow for, say, support services if the town were needing to have some housing that the airport could give up. That just doesn't look possible with this bed plan currently and in future years. And so, like I said, we're still working out the kinks until we finally get the full who currently is going to get hired and who needs true additional beds for this coming season. So I should have the solid number by the next airport commission meeting, once we know everyone's been hired.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions just to discuss that further? Okay, keep us posted and let's do the best we can with what we have. Thank you. Fuel subcommittee update. So that's going to take us to, we've got 4 items to discuss. Our subcommittee has been diligently working through this with thanks to both of you. And so I'll defer to either one of Mr. Levitt or Mr. Marks, who might like to present the update from the subcommittee. Mr. Marks, the floor is yours.
I'd like to speak towards the increase in the fuel supply, and then Mr. Levitt on the charges and stuff like that, because he worked hard. He figured that stuff all kind of out. In the subcommittee meeting, we reviewed, based on the existing situation where we weren't in time to get into this town meeting. We want to regroup on that and proceed with getting a good design with guidelines from the committee and staff, such that the design is done, the way we've envisioned it, taking into consideration the increase in fuel supply, and also the down the road having to decommission the underground tanks, which are the 2 avgas tanks and 1 Jet A tank. Get that all kind of lined up so that when that happens, it's just a matter of, we don't impact what we have, in other words. And also there was discussions about the MEPA and the other thing there to file that separately, a separate MEPA plan for the fuel tank expansion, because this is based on an existing need today, not an emergency per se, but we run out of fuel, so it's a big concern to do that. And we would run that outside of the one that we just approved tonight, so as not to affect that one, in the event that we still, at the time when that is scheduled for an increase in fuel supply, that we still have it in place to do so. Yeah, we had lots of discussions about the nuts and bolts of the fuel farm, and I don't think we need to do that here unless somebody has any direct questions. I'm happy to do that. Still looking at 4 tanks. Yeah, so I think that's kind of where we're at right now. So
thank you. I had a question on that, which Mr. Lasden, when I read the contract for the environmental permitting, it covered, I believe, MEPA for fuel farm expansion as one of the projects. And so do you see this aligning with that effort, or any concerns, anything that we should be aware of as we want to make sure that we stay on track while we're putting a pause for this town meeting because of all of the sort of moving pieces? Is it going to align with that contract that we just approved? to get this done and then cover the work as scope as intended by our subcommittee.
So yes, it's included in the current MIPA-NEPA document. We've actually reached out to the state to see if we can separate this project and do it sooner. Under the thought that you were trying to do this sooner. So we've actually asked the question, see if we could pull this one piece out and do it faster.
And so sort of an approved project segmentation.
It would be a segmented standalone project is what we're asking them. They have not given us an opinion back.
So I think my question there is, as you got to the point of what would have been, or my concern was that we could advance that effort still under that contract as a segmented project.
Yeah, that's what we're asking to do. Yes.
And I appreciate that, but I also want to be sure that it was the work to do that would remain, even if segmented, covered under the umbrella the contract that we just approved.
Yes.
Very good. I just want to make sure that we don't have an extra piece of things.
No.
So as we're looking at what it's going to take to get this done, that piece is essentially covered under that, and hopefully, with the grant as well.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Did anybody else have any questions, wish to add anything on the expansion and our intended track with that? Mr. Levitt?
Yeah, I wanted to follow up on what Phil said and do, I think, a little bit of housekeeping here. At the last meeting, we had discussed the plan to rapidly get in front of Capcom, FinCom, and the town to try and push funding through in this budget cycle in this town meeting. And everybody was very supportive, for which we appreciate. It looks like we were a couple of weeks too late in that the warrant had already gone to press. And although there were some ways to do on-the-fly amendments, the recommendations were that it was a bit too complex a task. So the fuel subcommittee has recommended that we kick that forward a year, but continue to work on the engineering. But I believe where the commission voted unanimously to put that into next year's budget, we probably should have a vote to agree to move that forward a year and clean that up. But I'll give that back to Art as chair.
No, I agree with that. And so is there would you like to make that motion?
So moved.
So for minutes and I think purposes, maybe we should restate to help the staff as they work on this. The motion would be to defer the fuel farm expansion to fiscal year 2027 as a capital request. Did I get that right?
That's correct. It's the $3 million capital request that we have.
So that is your motion. And
yes,
is
sir.
there a second?
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt? And the
Aye.
chair votes aye, with a comment that I certainly appreciate the effort that everybody put into that to try to advance it on the warp speed round, but we'll get it we'll get it next time. I think. Seasonal staffing.
Okay, so we've discussed both at the commission meetings and in the fuel subcommittee the need to have sufficient staffing, particularly where we're going to have more fuel supply this year and going forward. What came out of this last meeting, the subcommittee meeting, with staff's input, was that the current staff, which looked like it would be 10 and two supervisors with the summer help, should be increased to 11 and 3. Maria has indicated that there's room in the budget for it. We understand there's a process of working through the union to get the jobs posted, but our recommendation is that we work to move those positions forward so that there is sufficient staff to be able to operate on the ramp safely and to allow us to deliver more fuel, which we know is one of our goals. Concurrent with that discussion was the housing issue. Well, let me back up a second. First was the recruiting. We had discussed at our previous meeting to try and expand the recruiting from when in prior years had just been asking around locally and at colleges to reach out to some of the counter-seasonal FBOs, the ski areas, the Sun Belts, Palm Springs, Scottsdale, South Florida. One thing we learned at our subcommittee meeting was that right now, when we bring in the summer temps, it takes 2 weeks to train them. If we bring in somebody who had been working at an FBO, that gets cut in half to about a week. So that's certainly more efficient, bringing more trained people. But where we hadn't really started to do that yet, we probably have a very small window left before those ski area and southern FBOs are starting to shut down, and their folks have made other plans for the summer. So we strongly encourage the staff to try and expedite any outreach to see if they can get more applications, particularly from experienced line staff. That rolled into, if we bring the staff in, having sufficient housing for them. And Warren just went through what he thought was available for beds. I had one note on the corner of my pad that I didn't clarify at the subcommittee meeting. Perhaps we can do it now. A comment was made that when we were counting the beds up in the dorm in Thompson House, that Thompson House was decommissioned last year. Could somebody explain what that meant and if anything needs to be done to recommission it if it's been decommissioned?
Yeah, I can.
I think they mean winterized, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, it gets winterized every year.
Yeah.
Because spring startup, it's not heated over the winter, so they got to drain the pipes. Not to jump, just because I've been through it.
Okay, so there wasn't anything else done or that needs to be done in there other than turn the water back on?
They did move some of the furniture and appliances out, and those are in storage over at the dorms. But I've already met with our FBO manager today. They're already starting to move stuff back. So it's a quick couple of day process. They've already started it, so it'll be ready to go by the end of the month. So yeah,
Great.
we're on top of that for sure. And then yeah, we have to just make sure we turn the water back on and the Wi-Fi.
Okay, so hopefully at our next meeting you can report to us how you're fully staffed and how successful this outreach has been. The next, rolling on to the unless anybody has any questions, rolling on to the next item that we talked about was the pricing policy. But I'm going to share my screen if that's okay.
Could we stay on staffing for 1 second?
Yep.
Yeah. Mr. Marks?
Do we have to as a commission approve that additional staffing?
No, I think I think that's a manager level decision, and I think we're giving feedback. And even that was what I want to have further discussion for just a minute to, be sure that our role is clear, here, that, again, if nobody objects and that this is being worked on, that this is the sense of the commission and direction, and it's given to the manager and the administration on sort of what we hope to see. But actual, I think staffing and exactly how that's done, we really have to put our faith in the manager that we hired, but hope that we've given him guidance and also get feedback from you, Mr. Smith, Mr. Harriman, if there are concerns with some of the discussion and direction that we're given as a commission. So I think that is just important to sort of touch on, that we're both sort of respectful of each other, and that I think that from a commission level, it's only fair that as we set policy, we hope that that is properly then implemented, that these are also further ideas that we see a way that you as management can, see that these policies and objectives in some cases, for example, increasing revenue, customer service, those sort of things that, that those are objectives of the commission that are implemented by management. So it might be a little bit of semantics, but I think it's important in these public discussions that, we sort of kind of cover that. And that we are also open, I think it's important while we're telling you that if there is feedback, concerns, reasons why, we had a hope that something, but in fact, it had to happen a little different. I think the best way to avoid surprises, disappointment, unmet expectations is through that communication and letting us know why something, might not come together. So as we have these some of these discussions at a commission level with everybody together, I think that's important to note. So did you guys have anything further on that?
Mr. Chair, if I may just add something, we already researched and reached out to our labor lawyer, and we don't need to negotiate with the union to add an additional supervisor and line personnel, since those are just additional positions, not a brand new positions. So we could move with those quickly.
I appreciate that additional information. And the effort. That's helpful. We definitely need to make sure that we stay in line there.
Mr. Chair, one thing for me, please.
Yes, please.
So as far as reaching out to other seasonal FBOs, I did reach out to Hadwin Fuller at World Fuel today, put them on high alert, and he's got a lot of connections, and he's going to start poking around and helping us out in that sense.
Excellent. That's
fantastic.
That's the way we network, and and having beds is the key difference. You can't have that discussion when here seasonally, but we built that dorm, and now we can pull all these pieces together. So thank you. Okay, moving on to the retail fuel pricing policy. Still have it.
So I'm going to throw up a few slides that we put together, which hopefully will be useful here. Well, I guess that's not it. Let's try this again. Okay, so what happens when you have too many windows open on your screen? Let's try and see if
I think in the future it might be better to get the slides to staff. And then, they do handouts. So even if it is, just to make sure that everybody is just seeing those if we could. You don't have to do it right. Don't do it right now. No, go right ahead.
No. But for some reason, I am not getting this up, which let me do one more try and bear with me a sec, and then we'll move on to something else.
We can see that.
Can we see this?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Okay. Stop me if you can't see it at any time. We put together a slide here showing what we've had in fuel inventory and capacity, and I think it visually demonstrates what a great job that Preston and his crew has been doing, putting together more on-site storage What we're looking at here is this green line here is what we had available for the maximum storage last year. It assumes it's 90% fill in the tanks and 100% fill in the trucks. As we discussed this year, we've got more trucks coming in. So some started to arrive already, and by the 1st of May, we'll be up here so that we will have more storage capability for fuel. These were the actual end of day inventory going back over the last year and a half. This blue line here was 24 to 25. The orange line here is where we're up to from 25 to 26. You can see that the seasonality has been about the same. But the real trick here to try and prevent some of this problem here when we had the runouts was to be able to fill this space here with getting our tanks full earlier in the season when we hopefully can get more ferry reservations. And this will give us more capacity of fuel to sell. This red line down here, this is our 40,000 gallon line. That's when we start pulling the alarm boxes that we're running out. We need more ferry space. We need more trucks. And you can see where that starts to happen in July and August. Any questions or comments on this? These slides will all be sent around after the meeting tonight.
Yeah, this is great. This is your projection based on last year's inventory, the blue line, is that or sales rather? I can't read the bottom. Is it the blue represents? Could you just tell me the legend of the blue line of
Sure.
the darkest blue?
This was end of day inventory from September of 24 through August of 25. So a year ago. This is what was left in the left in the tanks and the trucks the end of the day.
So all right.
And the orange was starting in September of 25 through the winter up till here. And that's overlaid on what our storage capacity
No,
is.
I got that part. It was the blue, it was that other blue line. Because what I'm trying to think about is then and maybe this is your next slide, is the projection for this year's sales, if we were to mirror last year's sales with this additional, it looks to me, if I was to tell me if I'm misinterpreting this, but when I look at the say cyan line or the line that represents the increased capacity, and I look at how far the dips, if you will, go below the red line, and you move all of that up, then we should be good. If assuming sales are the same, right? Just as a baseline for discussion, I think that your graph is demonstrating that we are, assuming all things being equal, not the additional fuel sale and what have you. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Yes, if the fuel sales were the same, if we could get more deliveries in here, so this whole segment was moved up to here.
Yeah.
Then we'd be fine.
Yeah.
But keep in mind that this summer we are going to have an additional 300,000 gallons of confirmed reservations already.
Right.
In July and August, we're getting 17 trucks a week instead of 14. So we should be able to keep these full.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else? Do you have another graph or more?
Yeah. Moving on to the next subject on here. And again, I apologize for not sending these out earlier, but they got finished at about 4:45 this afternoon. We've been taking a look at what Nantucket's retail price is for fuel versus other airports in the region. And this heavy red line is Nantucket's price for Jet A retail. And as you can see, contrary to the rumors that everything's more expensive on Nantucket, our fuel is actually less than all of these other airports here. And these include White Plains, Teterboro, Bedford, Boston, East Hampton, and that's Bar Harbor. And when you get these hard copies, you'll be able to see it. I understand you can't see it on here. We're kind of right here in the middle with people like Hyannis, the Vineyard, Chatham, but that really isn't where our customers are going or coming from. 40% of the turbine arrivals and departures here using ADS-B data come from or go to White Plains, Teterboro, Bedford, and Boston. So this is really our so-called competition for fueling up here. What this shows is that we have the ability to raise our pricing a bit and still be below other areas. For instance, today we're at $8.50. East Hampton is at $11.08. Big differences. So given where this pricing is, we started to take a look at, let me see if I can make this a little bigger. Can folks read that?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is an example of the cost comparison for somebody flying to Nantucket and some of these other destinations. One of the things that goes on at a number of these other destinations, these here, they require minimum fuel purchases. And these are the types of minimum fuel purchases that are required for a few categories of aircraft: a turboprop, a superlight, mid, and a heavy. For somebody who was going to any one of these airports buying this amount of fuel, even though it's not required at Nantucket, this is what you would spend between fuel and ramp fees. So once again, you can see that we're one of the bargain spots in the area. And by the way, Phil will point out that there are a number of users that have discount agreements at some other airports, and we're using retail pricing. Nantucket doesn't offer discounts, but even if you start to factor in some of the discounts, there's such a wide disparity that that we're still priced below other key airports. So we started to take a look at how we're pricing fuel here. And right now, the way we price our retail fuel is that we get fuel deliveries a couple of times a week. Our finance department does a great job of calculating the blended cost of the fuel in our tanks using a FIFO method. So we know what it costs, what's in there. What they've been doing is sending that information to the airport manager, who then sets the price, which creates a spread. I sort of did this upside down, where this blue area here is the spread that we're putting on top of the cost of our fuel that's up here. This green line in here, if you come across and look at it, is going to show that our average spread right now on what we've had for the past year is around $4.55. What we had discussed at the fuel subcommittee was that we should lift that up. One thing that we've been doing is the only item that's in our base cost before putting on our spread is the cost of fuel, where a number of other airports also include the cost of renting the fuel trucks. It turns out that our cost is about 8 cents a gallon. That could be put into the fuel formula. So we had looked at this, and the fuel subcommittee's recommendation is to move our margin, two things. One, as opposed to having it float and be subjective, to be a fixed number, and to make that fixed number $4.90 a gallon. What it will also do is, as soon as we get a fuel delivery and our average cost of fuel price changes, that will instantly update the retail price. We've had some situations, for instance, in the past few weeks, where fuel prices are moving rapidly, that we've gotten a load of fuel on a Tuesday. So our average cost has gone up, but we haven't adjusted our retail price until the following week. So we've essentially lost money for that week. So by moving over to this system, it will take some of the burden off management in setting the price, where it will just become an automatic function. So one of the motions that we'll want to make tonight is an agreement that we will set it at this 490 level and make it a ministerial function that the finance department will do. Before I get to that motion, just very quickly, similar chart here for Avgas, where the numbers and the margins are lower. But again, we want to put a fixed number in for that as well. Questions?
Anyone? No, let's keep going.
Okay. Another item that we discussed, and the fuel subcommittee decided not to take any action on right now, but we're going to continue it in our future discussions, is what we have that I'm kind of in shorthand calling the freeloaders. All of our, not all of our, but a significant portion of our operating and capital expenditures are paid for by our customers that arrive and buy fuel. We have some customers who are great about it. They buy fuel almost every time. Back in the day, back when we were operating G2s and Jetsstars, there was a concept called courtesy fuel, where anybody visiting a transient FBO always bought fuel. That isn't so much happening anymore. We took a look at all of the customers that come in here, and this is sorted by the number of invoices. They get an invoice every time they arrive at the FBO. So here, for instance, is a customer that was here 633 times. That was probably a fleet customer, so it's multiple aircraft. But of those 633 times, he only bought fuel 46 times, or 7.3% of the times he was here. Total of 1,300 gallons over the year. So he was averaging only 2 gallons each time he showed up. We have some people here that never bought fuel. And this right here is a list of the worst offenders. You can see that all of them average only 18 gallons per arrival. If we were to break this out, for instance, just by fleet, types of fleet or classes of aircraft, this is the heavies. So we've got the Challenger 600s, Falcons, and the Gulfstreams. And you can see that these vary a bit too. They still, I believe, are relatively low. But here we have a customer who was here 168 times, and 72% of the time they're buying fuel. Contrast that with somebody here who's only buying it 8% of the time, and somebody here who's buying it 0% of the time. If we were to implement a minimum fuel purchase requirement, as many of those other airports that I showed you on the previous slide did, on heavies of 950 gallons, it would mean that to bring everybody up to that, we'd sell another 453 gallons or bring in another $2.2 million of revenue. So these are numbers that we're going to continue to crunch and look at in the fuel subcommittee. We certainly don't believe we're in a position today to implement any type of minimum fuel purchases where we don't have sufficient supply. The worst thing would be telling people they have to buy fuel and they're not having it to sell to them. We think that as we straighten out some of the supply challenges and the storage challenges, that we'll be able to work into this. But I think we want to be thinking about what we do with the small minority of freeloaders that are taking advantage of the airport and not contributing their fair share. Again, I'm going to send all the slides around, and that's what I had. But I think the only motion out of all of this that I'd like to make is that we implement the fuel pricing policy and strategy of using the fixed margins and tasking our finance department with automatically pricing fuel each time we get a delivery.
Thank you for all that. Does anybody have any questions? Mr. Smith, any input? You're supportive of the subcommittee's intended approach?
Absolutely. Yeah. As we discussed yesterday, I think that those are the right approaches for each of those.
Anyone else, staff-wise? Okay. Mr. Levitt, do you want to formulate that motion and make it?
I would like to move that we set the fixed margin for fuel that the finance department will automatically adjust retail pricing based on that each time a new fuel delivery is received.
And is there a second?
Second.
And seconded. Any further discussion? Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Marks?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt?
Aye.
And chair votes aye. And with thanks to the subcommittee for all your work on this, and staff also. I know that pulling all of this together, but I really hope, and I just want to add a little piece that, we've been working on this in February and March. I hope that this is that we're coming at it in a way that helps you guys as well, to be able to put it into place, before it is just insane or as busy as could be. So, thank you. And the jet fuel purchase, the subcommittee can, continue at some future date to meet and discuss and come back, I think, to the commission at will. And with that, we will move on to the next item, which is ramp management plan discussion. And so over the years, we've had various ramp. We're talking at this point about the general aviation ramp. I do think that the north ramp and the commercial operators needs a sort of a look at also. But I think from a staffing and management perspective, we could look at the FBO, and that the north ramp is, if we could look at lease compliance with terms of the GPUs. And hopefully, as part of the optimization project, I really believe on the north ramp, if we could electrify that, it would go a long way to managing what's happening up there. The draft management plan is laid out with policies and with objectives, essentially to work to reduce the emissions on the ramp and the noise and the length of on the ground runtime to the extent that we can. The commission has had a long-standing 15-minute APU policy. I think that was put into place prior to some of the fleet mix that we have now. And if we want to have a policy that is more readily adhered to. It has to be a workable policy in terms of understanding that some of the larger craft aircraft need some additional time beyond that. And so the way this was structured was to divide out those class aircraft to allow a little extra time for the aircraft that may need it. This was partially modeled after Seattle has similar policies in place, so we're not just completely in brand new territory here. And the hope would be that we could continue to use our education component, that with signage and trying to reach out to the pilots and between the FBO lounge, and there's the sort of fly friendly approach that the airport's had for a long time, but that's really an airside discussion, I think, for another day. And this particular focus is on the ground side. The one of the components of the engine running is how do we try to effectively, have some sort of enforcement capability that is workable. And also, I think what's very important is that the commission provides tools to the staff so that as they're working the line and the ramp, they can point to a document and say, I'm just doing my job. They're not the bad guys, and should, someone doesn't want to shut it down, this has come from Nantucket's Airport Commission that this is the policy, and that's why we are bringing your runtime to your attention and, asking that you curb that use. So we have new software in development that the commission supported, which is the 1200 Aero. I attended a meeting last week along with Ms. Collins, Mr. Smith, with the CEO of that company, who assured us that early May we're looking at hopefully a delivery. It's in development. Yeah, I don't think he actually had any kind of product that was ready to share, but we did discuss some of the sort of dashboard metrics and how they might convey that data to the line staff in the airport, essentially in a graphic manner, possibly, so that someone working could open up a dashboard, a web page, or what have you, and see that a particular aircraft is a particular color that's been running for over a certain period. And then that also will populate lists that could then be reviewed after the fact. So the policy contemplates a combination of both when staffing allows real-time notification to a particular operator, or up to 30 days afterwards to send them a notice based upon essentially an audit of the runtimes. And try to get greater cooperation. What I think, as we've tried this for a couple of years, there's varying levels of reasoning that is given, and it's so subjective that what does somebody who's working on the ramp say when someone says, well, we're just waiting for them to show up, and you say, okay, well, they gave a valid reason. Well, how do you sort of balance that out? So this is an effort to establish some guidelines for that. And I think the big change is that what's in here, we would implement a notification system, essentially an optional verbal warning, and then followed by a written warning, and then subsequent offenses would then have essentially a penalty. And the penalties that are contemplated are essentially not trying to get into financial at this point. Again, I think this is a policy that is going to have to be revisited after our first summer, and take feedback from the staff and how things worked. But to instead say, what we would do is to withhold, services that are offered by the airport as an amenity, but not, essentially a right. And the first would be catering. And that would be for what's proposed would be to do it for, say, 3 operations. And the tracking of this is something that's going to have to, somewhat be worked out. And I think there's going to have to be a little bit of a learning curve and understanding for our expectations if we adopt this policy from a commission that there'll be some run up time, for lack of a better, no pun intended, but and then if we continue to an operator continues to exceed the run times, then we would look at withholding vehicle escorts to the ramp, and essentially they still would be free to use the shuttle to get to the planes, and as opposed to private vehicles and the escorts. So, and then if we have continued uh, you know, problems that someone just keeps doing it, then I think that there's a provision for the manager to consider any additional time for withholding those things. Though I think that would be something that he would really want to come to the commission of what he might be thinking about there. It's sort of a hoping it doesn't kind of get to that, but at least there. Also included in this is an appeal process. Everybody should always have, in my opinion, and into any policy, a recourse that they feel like they were treated, unfairly or whatnot. So first, that would go to the manager, and then if they didn't agree with that, it could come to the commission. And so that's the APU side of things, and then the other is to formalize the policy related to the engines pointing towards the inward towards the runway and not towards the road. And I think that's more important than ever as that bike path comes online directly against the fence there. So I think that's something else that we really, want to consider and encourage. And we understand that there are situations with certain winds where they need to be, put into that, pointed differently. But that I think is something that is going to have why we're going to want the data, and it can't just be it needs to be justified in terms of to operate the aircraft safely. That's the way it has to be done, and not just a convenience factor, I think. And so I think that is the summary of the policy that has been some years in discussion for the commission to consider and discuss and see where it goes. Any questions or thoughts? Mr. Marks.
Why you would be already started up and not be able to leave. We should also look at all the airside reasons why that might be, right? Like in the summertime, you can get what's called edict time, or all of a sudden they have flow control in the air, which means you get delayed from leaving.
You're really broken up. We got like probably 3/4 of what you said. But I think that absolutely there's got to be an allowance for out of the pilot's control, right? Like, if there is, a justified basis, and that's something that I'm not sure how exactly, we go about that. I think that, if the staff, if they contact the pilot and then they document that, then that's the reasoning that we can start. And if it's a national airspace issue and they're truly just waiting to get on the line and go, I think that is something that's very different than waiting for a passenger. When we document and understand that, and maybe the policy needs to be, and I look to staff for some input on that, if there's a additional line or exception, or that a warrant, a violation wouldn't be issued for certain hold reason. I don't, I'd want that kind of feedback and see what we could do, right? Something we absolutely, the goal as I see it here is, to remain fair, and these are generally, we want all of these aircraft coming and going and using our airport and buying our fuel, and we're here to fly in and out. That's great, but I don't think we can just continue to sit by and have operators run in case of last year, for 4 hours, right? As it's an extreme, but you also have a couple of 2 hour type, run times that you've got. Massachusetts has got these 10 and 15-minute anti-idling laws. Now, I know they don't apply somehow to aviation, but in general, if we're going to consider, and that's part of the educational component that I hope the outreach can continue to be, is that most of these folks that are coming here, I think I speak for all of us, we live, this is one of the most beautiful places in the world. We got that clean air and the clean water. They come here for these resources, and realizing that that's really our goal, is a preservation of the natural environment on Nantucket for all to enjoy. And I'm perhaps going on a little bit, but I think that that is part of why we're asking them to curb those run times, not to have it just a matter of convenience, but only what is really needed for that true aviation purpose. So that's my hope. Mr. Levitt.
A couple of things. The way these aircraft are operated, particularly the large fractional fleets, any one of the users, NetJets and FlexJet calls them owners, or charterers, can book the aircraft with a 2-hour sliding departure. So they call in and they say, I want that aircraft. I'm going to be there between 9 and 11. The crew then needs to have that cabin ready for them as if they're arriving at 9. The passengers will not put up with arriving on a hot day and the cabin isn't cooled down, or reverse in the winter. The pilot is going to set up and start that aircraft based upon what's in their ops manual. So for most of these operators, trying to negotiate with the pilot and asking him to change the rules is something that he can't do. This needs to be done by dealing with their DOs, and understanding what's in their manual. Next thought, in terms of penalizing them, financial penalties don't matter to them, so that's a waste of time to go after. Some of the penalties or disincentives that you mentioned, such as cutting off catering, that kind of hurts us, since we get a percentage of the catering. So that's probably something that we wouldn't want to do. But what does bother them and could have an impact are inconveniences. So the idea of not allowing ramp access, that's going to get to them, particularly when the guys in the back want to know why they're on the bus, and not in their own car. Next thought is, if the guilty party is the PIC on that aircraft, and you want to penalize him for the next 3 times he's in, again, if he's flying for one of the large operators, he may not be back in that same tail number the rest of the season. That tail number may come back, but it has totally different crews on it. So you're going to have trouble coming back after the fact to the same offender. So it's a tough situation, but I think you need to think through how these aircraft actually operate, and who's giving them instructions, and if they're violating regulations, who's responsible for that.
Thank you. So I think that we need to work through a bit of this in terms of how this will functionally, happen. And that's why I really wanted to get it sort of in front of the commission for tonight. And then if, it's continued and revised and, we talk about it at the next meeting, that's, completely fine. The catering thing to me seems like it's probably not going to be, maybe I'm wrong, all that many, and it's a small percentage of a sale in the overall, and it's more of a message. And it's a smaller message than restricting the ramp access. That was what I was thinking. So how much of a financial hit does the airport really take as a percentage of a catering versus trying to get attention to promote cooperation? I'm not married to it, honestly. I was just trying, I was trying to go with a less extreme first approach than understanding that, the ramp access is really a big one, and we don't want to restrict it. We just want you to, curb the use. And my hope is that given the big operators that the couple of larger ones that we have that do a lot of operations here, we're a significant market for them. And I think that the discussion is with corporate, if you will, about this policy and how it may, they hopefully will make some changes to how their business model is. Maybe I'm overly hopeful here, but we're in Nantucket and we're a significant, I believe, destination for much of their clientele. And maybe that 2 hour window needs to change to 1 hour for flights in and out of Nantucket. And then that helps them to be closer. What can we do that they don't sit there because of that 2 hours? 2 hours times all of those jets just running just doesn't seem like something that is positive operationally to me. So, Mr. Buscarin?
Yeah, I don't think withholding services makes any sense to me. I think the best we can do on this policy is just jawbone people. Get on some frequency and tell them that they've been running their APU for 30 minutes and they got to shut it down for 10 minutes. Do something. I mean, the pilot can certainly manage his air conditioning, his ATC contacts to some degree by shutting down the APU. It doesn't take forever to get these airplanes cooled off. Maybe on the worst day, he's got to run his APU a little longer to keep the airplane cool. I understand the operator's problem, but withholding services doesn't make sense to me.
So we've been a few years into this of trying to go that approach and have not been effective in curbing those run times. Now, if we need to, we can, whole or either do some lesser policy. This is up to everybody. And I know this is a change. I think we need a policy of some sort that helps the ramp ops to show and demonstrate that they're there. The other side of this is customer service and improving our customer service to the folks coming in. And so I think that part of this is considering, again, we went to staffing it on the jet fuel. I think it's tied together, that you have a seasonal position that's related to whether it's the job owning, as you want to put it, or whether it's sending, more formalized tracking of data. The other way that we could do this is that, and I think it should be done, anyway, it was in our packet tonight for the first time, is an actual, APU with a tail number associated with it. Now, that's a start, but we could go with publishing data, so, and it should be just spit right out of 1200 Aero that is tail number and run times. And that we could go from there to start. My hope was to open up a discussion directly with some of these operators to encourage why this needs to be done. And I think if we think we're just going to rely on please stop it alone, I just don't know that we're really getting that it's effective. Perhaps the more publishing of data and would be an alternative to that. But Mr. Marks.
Yeah, I just think that I appreciate the dilemma and the that we're dealing with, right, and the severity of it with the neighbors and so on, and of course just burning the fuel. But I'm wondering how many GPUs do we have, and is that really like, so should we have more GPUs? Should we charge for the GPU if they're going to be sitting there for more than so many minutes, right? I think that's kind of how it works in some places. I don't recall because I've never used one, but so if we had more GPUs, maybe some electric ones, and then maybe to talk to the pilot, say, hey, listen, are you going to be running for a long time? If you do, we got to move you and get them out of the area where it's a problem. Try to move them somewhere else. And just thoughts. I mean, I don't, it's not an easy answer.
So I think that's what we've been doing is encouraging GPUs, and we've funded pretty much every year, I think, for the last few years, additional GPU units. How many are we up to now? Warren or Preston? 6?
I think it's 6. Preston, you probably know the answer better to that.
I believe we're 5.
Right.
And again, if we should include that in and I think there's an expectation that, for example, a Friday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon, there's a whole lot of activity, and you're not going to put all of these jets on the GPUs. But what about, Wednesday at 6, and there's 3, 4 that are getting ready, and you've got someone that's running for that amount of time? Are we going to have a policy as the airport? And I think a lot of this goes back to commitments that were made for the South ramp expansion, that we were going to better manage the run times on the ramp. And that's, I think, an effort to do that. And again, if there's suggested revisions to the policy so that it's something we can get behind, which even strikes some of the withholding services or withholding catering, or having the ramp withholding that be as a result of a more severe infraction. Like, let's say to start, that happens if you run for an hour and a half. But like, let's try to get the worst offenders. I guess I wanted to open this up, and I think the only way we could really all discuss it collectively was to put something together and put it out there. But my hope is that we can come to, as everyone can maybe, we could table this for a month. Everybody can think about it now, perhaps suggestions or additional feedback, and see maybe what we might be able to work on a starting point. And I think that having something would help discussions with those corporate, operators, to say that in fact this is a policy, this is an effort that's been formalized, and what can we do? So I'm open to sort of everybody. Just Mr. Buscarin, you've made your point very clear, and I get it, but go ahead.
Yeah. Since they don't care about how much money they spend, if they're going to run their APUs or engines for longer than 30 minutes, charge them, $100 a minute, $1,000 a minute. If they don't care about what they're paying, why don't we turn this into a money-making operation?
I mean, there is that. There's certain airports that have after a certain time, a per minute. I was trying to, my sense, maybe that's where everyone wants to go, was not to try to track that and to collect that, but to, in fact, have a system that, again, we welcome these folks. This isn't to try to push anyone away. It's to say, though, can you please, work with us to limit that use? Otherwise, if you continue to do that, and maybe these first round of withholding services are too quick to the trigger, for a discussion. I mean, if I wouldn't, even though I want this whole policy or some kind of a policy, I'm not necessarily, or if it was going to be financial, right? Is it, because I had discussed that with Tom some years ago, and then nowhere in terms of like if you had, that was sort of my first thought was, it was a warning at 30 minutes and it was $100 at 45 minutes, and then it was 500 in an hour or 1,000, sliding scale. But I wanted to also keep it somewhat manageable from the staff side of things and the collection. I hear you on the money because then you could just buy more GPUs, right? That's the other side of a policy like that, is that it becomes self-supporting. So I mean that, I guess, Mr. Levitt.
Again, money doesn't matter. You could charge them $10,000. It isn't going to move the needle on the total cost of their operation. What is going to bother them are two things. One is inconvenience. So we could very simply say, if you have to run your APU, you're going to be parked in the most inconvenient spot on the airport, which is going to take you longer to walk or ride back in. And you may not have priority on an escort to get out there. And it only has to happen once that the guy in the back is inconvenienced, that he's going to give his crew hell, that it never happens again. The second thing that's, again, is going to bother the guys in the back the most is being on the wall of shame. So let's publish the offenders and not only put down the tail number, but put down who the operator is. Now, that isn't going to help you on a fractional because you're never really going to know who's back there. But there are plenty of users that we know whose airplane that is. And that gets posted in the FBO. The local press tends to pick up things like that. And that is gonna bother the aircraft owners and users more than the crew tells them, hey, I had to spend $10,000 to keep your aircraft cool today. That doesn't matter to them.
Preston.
Mr. Chair, I think we all agree that this policy needs to happen and we need to have a little more stricter guidance on this whole big picture. But don't forget about the staff, the guys, the gals that are on the ground. They're going to be taking the backlash from pilots, owners, and passengers if they have to walk a half a mile, a quarter mile down the ramp with their catering bags, or they've got to wait 15, 20 minutes for the bus to jump on the bus, or they can't get their vehicle out. I understand what everybody's saying, but don't forget about the staff members that have to take that and answer those questions. Secondly is the tracking. It's going to take a small army to track this. And I know the FBO and the ops staff are tapped out the way it is as far as multitasking. So we might have to have some additional help.
Thank you for that. And I hope that there's two things. One, the tracking, I think there's an understanding it can't be in real time all the time. In those slower times, though, it might be able to be done, right? If you're capturing, it's 6 o'clock on Tuesday morning, and there's only just one guy that's out there running, and they can point to the policy. But right, and that's where the way I wrote it in was contemplating up to 30 days later you could receive this notice. And so one of the and I'm very sensitive having to staff burden of workload as well as interactions, becoming negative. On the workload, that's where, a seasonal position that you guys will have to, this might need some work, but it's not under the direct supervision as a ramp worker, but it's more in the admin building that does the auditing, that's looking back over these. It's not somebody that's in the full operations, and it's providing support seasonally to the overall administration. And whether that is to, that's maybe a bit of a catch-all position. And then that would be someone that hopefully would work the weekends on a seasonal basis and covered, so that, that was something that I had discussed to try to address that, because I don't want to put something in that makes everybody, life more difficult, and see how we can. So, and then that's where the hope was that the software is going to go a long way too, right? That it doesn't have to be that, well, hold on, I got to go out with a clipboard and kind of talk to them or see like that. That is an army. That's just not, and that's where we've been. So this is to sort of hopefully leverage some software, maybe some AI assistance, in sort of mining that data as you go forward, is the hope. In terms of the pushback, I would hope that the policy, helps that staff member to say, I totally understand. It's just, I'm just doing my job, and it's those guys, sitting on this board, that are, the bad guys, so to speak. And, a bit of an inconvenience. I think that has to be balanced, that they're upset and inconvenience, but what did they just, if they're at that level, they were just, leaving, jets running for hours. How does that consider the interest of the public, compared to the individual, and I think that there's an aspect of that should be considered. So I hear you for sure, and I don't want that to be a end result. I think in response to both Mr. Levitt, Mr. Buscarin, I think that if you think that, the catering is, also a tracking and not really an effective thing, then we look at more on, a ramp access, and maybe we revise it so that doesn't happen, just that it takes a few warnings to get to that point. So there you have your job owning, you have a more official notice, and then you do a log, and then you say, look, after like this many times, it's been an hour or something. Like, let me, come up with a bit of a revised, draft there that maybe waters this down a little bit, but then still gives us something to have a discussion with the operators, that this is this is the objective that we're trying to achieve, and maybe that works. Ms. Collins, you're muted.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for bringing up all these points. One thing I wanted to bring up, and someone correct me if like this is just not the way how like general aviation and FBO typically works. So one thing that I am hearing right now is that we're really looking at this ramp APU use on a level that is operator specific, pilot specific, and aircraft specific. And so one of the things that I'm really looking forward to with this new aviation software that we're developing is that we can get a list of the aircraft tail numbers and which like what times they were correlated to. I think, based off my understanding, is that for some of the tail numbers, or a good majority of them, we know which airline company, just, as an example, say like NetJets or Slate, or, fill in the blank here, not to, throw anyone under the bus. We know that specific codes line up with airline companies. And as we develop an outreach strategy, would it be worthwhile and efficient to kind of just make a list and reach out to the companies and to make relationships with them, to just like, hey, like these were the ones that were non-compliant throughout like your say like week or month, and just show them like this is the whole level of impact your company as a whole is making on our airport, and then try to address this and at least monitor it and notify on really that aviation that airline level and company level. Is like, how do we feel about that?
I think that's what we're trying to do. This is going to give you that data, and it's also going to get some attention by having some teeth to it. Mr. Levitt?
Yeah. One thing that you were talking about is telling people that, they may hear from us within 30 days. Keep in mind that our operations are concentrated over about 90 days, maybe even 60 days. So if you've got somebody who was running their APU for a couple of hours waiting for pups to let out, and they leave, we're not going to see them again until next June or July. And if they're here for July 4th, yes, we may see them more during the season, but to not get back to them for 30 days and then giving them a reasonable amount of time to discuss and get back to us, the next thing we know, the season's over. So it needs to be done on a much shorter string if you're going to have any kind of outreach and you want behavior to change during the season.
Good point. More like 10 days? 7? It's going to be workable on a staff level too, a work week.
Yeah, but I think you need to get out ahead of it in that there were probably 25 operators that are 80% of the traffic here. And if you speak to them before the season starts and you talk to them about, some issues that we have, and the conversation ought to be around more than just APU use. Say, you're going to be in here a lot this summer. Let's talk about what we can do to make it a smooth summer for both of us. APU can be on the list. I'd love to have on the list. We need to see you buying fuel when you're here, and talk to them about what else they would like to have from us. But we're one of the few FBOs I know where the FBO doesn't have a customer service manager whose job it is to stay in touch with the customers when they're not here on the ramp, because most of the time and most of the decision makers are not the guys that are driving the airplanes. So if you want to change behavior at these operators, it's going to come from the top down, and we should start beforehand. So when there's a violation, you can go back to the person that you've got a relationship with to say, hey, we discussed this, but this tail was in here over the weekend and it ran for 3 hours, and maybe you didn't get the word to this crew. And that's going to be a lot more cooperative than the after the fact game. Now, there are going to be the guys that are only in here once or twice that you're not going to get to ahead of time. But I think that that getting to the big frequent operators early before there's a problem is going to be a lot more effective.
So I agree, and thanks. And your fuel slide really highlights that, right? That there is repetitive customers, and I think that operators and customers, and that's what I think. This isn't in any way expecting perfection, but if we could knock off the 80%, as you'd say, right, and approach them. And so we have a meeting set up in 2 weeks that's been in the works for some time, that pretty much invitations have gone out to several or as many of the operators, I believe, as we could, to talk about it collectively and how expectations for the season. And I think that could follow up with personal an appeal that we should have some one-on-one. And it's exactly that. I think that this is a two-pronged approach, that we want to improve our customer service and relations and ramp service, and understanding limitations of staff, right? But it still doesn't mean that you can't make them feel welcome and be open to what might you have for an idea, or how might Nantucket be able to provide something that's going to improve your visit and your stay here. And doing that more on a one-on-one. It's not a suggestion box in the lounge kind of a thing. I think is really important, and so that is set up. And that's where my thought was that, along with that, there could be discussion that we're working on developing this policy. And these are some of the ideas that have been kind of kicked around, and what do they have for ideas of how this such a policy could work that, understanding that, their objectives is not going to be the same as ours, when it comes to convenience and sort of the paying clientele, and where do we get with that? So I don't want to continue. It's been a long night, and I mean, I'm happy to hear what everybody has to say on this. I certainly, favor continuing this and seeing if we could work up maybe a revised draft so that there at least is something, that is from a commission's more official, that hopefully helps some of the line, staff and the admin be able to implement this. And we're certainly going to get the data. So I have some notes. I'll take a stab at a bit of a revised draft, and any other ideas or thoughts, I think, and maybe we can talk about it again in May and see where everybody's at, if that seems reasonable.
Yeah, two other suggestions. One,
Yep.
if you have these meetings set up, I would suggest that rather than make it a meeting just to talk about APUs and how you want to set them up for punishment. I hope it's more of a meeting of, hey, we'd like to get together with you to hear about what you want and for you to hear our needs and to make it much more
It
cooperative.
didn't even get thrown out about the APU. It was actually, the meeting was proposed on the opposite. It's a season kickoff.
Great.
With the operators and the clients. And so this is going to get floated as part of that, and asking, I think absolutely the approach is, there's that, is very important. This is not we're seeking a mutual cooperation, and it's a discussion, and an informal discussion is the first, I think, phase and approach to that. And then you said you had another suggestion.
Yeah. And the second point is, I don't know if you've been in touch with NBAA, but they do a lot of work coordinating between operators and airports and setting policies. And they may have already done this with some other airports. They're a great resource, and also a great person to be kind of the mediator in between if there are competing interests. So I would encourage.
Yeah, we'll follow up with Warren and maybe yourself on that if you've got contacts. And again, I think this is why we wanted to take the collective, approach here, that how do we make some improvements and continue to, be a welcoming airport. Thank you. Anybody else? I think everyone's probably ready to move on. Fuel revolver spending limit increase, Mr. Smith.
For sure. Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Real quick, I know we had come to you guys about 2-3 months ago, and we had increased the fuel revolver back then up to $8.5 million. However, due to the unforeseen circumstances of the war going on in the Middle East and the excessive rise in fuel costs, as we're all kind of feeling it even in our own pockets as we go to gas up, that it's clear evidence that we're going to need to increase that fuel revolver again to compensate for the remainder of this fiscal year. And so the finance department has been looking at a solid number of what we anticipate with the increased fuel cost. And I'm looking for a motion to increase the fuel revolver by the commission from $8.5 million to $11 million.
Such a motion, and then we'll take any discussion.
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
Motion been made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? And there's a FinCom meeting on Thursday night at 5:00 to also review this. Motion been made and seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin?
Aye.
Mr. Levitt? Mr.
Aye.
Marks?
Aye.
And Chair votes aye. Thank you. Managers report. I think, Mr. Smith, I don't want to cut you off, but maybe hit on the big ones. And
You bet. Mr. Chair, thank you. Just on the big ones, commuter aprons out to bid, waiting for an April 22nd date. Fuel farm remediation project. This pertains to the PFAS resistant paint that's going to be applied to the fuel farm concrete catch basement walls. That's going out tomorrow for RFP with a pre-bid meeting scheduled for April 23rd. Of course, the sound barrier wall has an April 22nd construction completion date. The panels are being installed, and the last panel should be installed by next week, with seeding to begin next week also in the areas that have been disturbed. The concrete hard stands construction has already begun as of last week, and that's on track for a May 21st completion date. Victor Brandon is currently paving the drive of the airport for this coming season. It looks really good out there. Sorry for the noise if you've been hearing it. As far as RFQs, we have two major ones with engineering, planning, and OPM services that we've received 3 proposals in each of those two respected RFQs. I had requested at an email last week if a commissioner would be able to assist us with these on the selection panel. I have not heard of from any takers, and we'd like to have these both wrapped up by the first week in May if possible. So please let me know if you would be willing to sit on the panel for search for our next engineers, as well as OPM for the next 3 years of our projects that we have for the airport.
Any takers? Anyone want to be on the evaluation committee?
I'll take it.
Way to step up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busker. And I have all the information in my office, so please feel free to come swing by at your discretion and come pick up those documents for you to review. Thank you.
Tomorrow.
Perfect. The IFB for the perimeter fence was completed. The contract went to Premier Fence. We're just awaiting the contract from them. Same with the annual Fuel Farm fire protection system. That was also done with Carlisle Engineering coming in as the lowest bidder for that project. We have requests for quotes out for the air traffic control tower for window replacement that needs to be done. That has been issued, awaiting for deadline, as well as the REOI request for expression of interest of the flat roof for a possible aviation school, flight training organization, and aircraft airframe maintenance repair. That went out on April 8th, and we're just waiting to hear back of any interest on that due May 6th. The only other major update that I have with airline service is that American Airlines did let us know that they are not going to upgauge to the A319 this summer. But again, it is heavily anticipated that next summer that will happen. They were able to double their workforce this summer through the purchase of additional housing on the island. So that puts them well in place for an additional upgauge next year. But they did also confirm that there's not going to be any dual operations this summer to keep things to a minimum. Besides that, that's all that I have for operations updates, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Back to you.
Anybody have any questions on any of those? Okay. I think we can skip statistics and personnel. I think you kind of covered on the housing.
Yep.
Said something else. Commissioners' comments? Anybody? Still have it.
I just had one thing to throw out. I've been getting emails from a number of the large FBO chains in the Northeast warning about the uptick in traffic from FIFA World Cup games coming through this summer, that they're getting lots of reservations both in the New York and Boston area for folks who are coming in, and assuming when people are coming from out of town, they're going to be making side trips for leisure. What better place to come than Nantucket after being in Foxborough? So I don't know if we're made any special plans for that, if we're expecting any additional traffic, but just a heads up for that.
Thanks. Anybody else? Okay. Thank you all. Is there any public comment? Items not on the agenda. Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved. Second.
Made, seconded. Ms. Planzer, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buscarin,
Aye.
Mr. Levitt,
Aye.
the Marks, Chair votes aye. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.